Hello there, lovely people. It's Alex from Nintendo Life here, and today it's time for us to review Game Builder Garage on the Nintendo Switch. This review was originally written by little old me, which means it's all mine. But anyway, that's more than enough waffling. Let's dive right into things. Game Builder Garage is a game where you make games yourself rather than letting trained developers do it for you. If that sounds like an awful lot of hard work, then Game Builder Garage probably is not going to be your flavor of choice. But if that sounds like a lot of hard work that you'd actually like to have a pop at, the question is, does it deliver enough to actually make it a worthwhile purchase? That's the question we hope to answer. The whole thing is split into two convenient parts: interactive learning and free programming. The former takes you through the basics of how the game works through 7 appropriately interactive lessons hosted by Bob, the indeterminate spec. Now, let's not beat around the bush. Game development deals with an incredible number of abstract concepts, including but not limited to the bane of every schoolchild: maths. For some, these ideas will click almost instantly, but for others it's a right old nuisance to wrap one's head around, and so a game like this can easily live or die by its tutorials. Thankfully, we're pleased to say that on the whole, Game Builder Garage's lessons are a triumph. You'll be making pre-planned games from scratch, suitably blending visual and kinesthetic learning theories in a way that initially holds your hand the first time you do something, but then upon repeat instances stops directly highlighting the buttons you need to navigate to and simply gives you a brief and clear commands such as, let's set this object's color to yellow. You can never do the wrong thing or even click on something you shouldn't, so there's no margin for error for younger players because there doesn't need to be. And as an added bonus, there's also a log if you forget what you're supposed to be doing because you mashed through the text faster than you intended, which I did a fair few times. Bob and the Nodon, which are the individual nodes that make up every aspect of the games you'll make, are all given unique personalities as well, preventing the learning process from getting too dry at any one point. We're not sure giving Effects Nodon's Scottish personalities necessarily makes anything easier or harder to learn, but it's entertaining, and that's never a bad thing. Throughout the lessons, you'll be walked through most of the Nodon you'll need to build a game. Emphasis on most. Sadly, many of the more complex Nodon, the ones that would actually need an explanation more than any others, are completely omitted from these lessons, instead being relegated to the Nodon you didn't meet in the game's credits. That's a yikes from me. It's not a totally lost cause though. As you complete each lesson, you'll have small checkpoints hosted by a similarly indeterminate spec called Alice. These test your knowledge of what you've just learned by getting you to solve puzzles in order to fix a broken mechanic within a game. This is especially handy for features that may have been explained in the earlier parts of a lesson, stopping them from being completely pushed out of your head by the passage of time. Many of the Nodon that aren't featured in the lessons can be found in several of these bonus puzzles in a separate selection that appears once all the lessons are completed, but most of them lack any explanation, meaning a lot of fumbling is sure to ensue. Explanations of a description are given for all the Nodon in the handy Nodopedia, which is definitely helpful but lacks any of the usage examples found during the tailored lessons. We're not entirely sure we can believe we're saying this, but Game Builder Garage could benefit from more tutorials. The other side of the game is free programming, which is, actually making games. Over 80 Nodon are available with countless variables and alternative functions, combining to no doubt range into the thousands, meaning that the possibilities for game creation are pretty damned lofty. There's even a texture Nodon which allows you to use custom, if slightly crude textures on objects, and even essentially create sprite-based games. It's not all peaches and rainbows though. For example, there's no custom model editor, so you're stuck using the in-game examples for absolutely everything. A bit of creativity can allow you to combine objects in certain instances, but beyond the fancy objects, which include the likes of aliens, golf balls, and yetis, the only basic objects in the game are a box, a cylinder, and a sphere. And that's it. We tried creating a sort of Star Fox type shooter using a UFO, planning to use objects to create something roughly approximating an R-wing, but unless there's something truly obvious we're missing, It's just not possible. For goodness sake, there's not even a pyramid object. How are we supposed to make anything pointy? There's a notable lack of theming as well. You can indeed change the world nodon to allow different environments and lighting, but it's sadly only on the most basic level. There are likely ways around this using the texture nodon, but considering its canvas can only boast a resolution of 64 by 64 pixels, texturing entire rooms looks very repetitive or very pixelated. The upshot is that if you're planning to make a 3D platformer, you're probably going to be controlling a generic person object, your platforms are going to be boxes, and your enemies are probably going to be some sort of fancy object. Probably aliens. Even a basic polygonal model creator would allow a whole lot more variance in the world and characters that could be portrayed, but as it stands, it's tremendously samey most of the time. Having said all of that, the mechanics available are absolutely staggering. One of the best new features in our humble opinion is the swap game nodon. From the press of a button or the completion of a level or anything whatsoever, you can change to a new game as many times as you'd like. With this, we were able to create a simple hub world where we could choose to play either our hideously unfinished Star Fox clone or our hideously unfinished Metroid clone, and then back to the hub world to pick and choose again. This may seem trivial, but this means that multi-level games and like linking to mini-games and things like that are now entirely feasible, in essence smashing many of the limitations of Labo VR. There's no way to browse other people's creations, which is a huge shame, we are not gonna lie, beyond sharing codes on other platforms, but it is entirely possible for people to create their own hubs where you can kind of browse and look at other people's games, which is ridiculous. Nintendo's taken the make your own damned games approach of Super Mario Maker 2 and blown the doors wide bloomin' open. On top of all of that, with any game capable of supporting up to 8 players, there's big potential for multiplayer here as well. The user interface, like the Swedish flag, is another big plus. Nintendo decided to do the unthinkable and allow users to use USB mice. I mean, take note dreams, am I right? Which, when combined with a USB keyboard, makes the entire process of creating games actually quite comfortable and simple. You don't need either of these things to do anything, of course, but we cannot sing the praises of this input method enough. USB mice! Oh my god! One thing it does lack, sadly, is the ability to edit or manipulate objects in 3D. Oftentimes you'll want to rotate something or attach one object to another, and you're forced to use abstract menus referring to axes and dimensions, all of which can be learnt and understood, but when you're trying to get something done through this method, it results in an awful lot of trial and error, which is less than ideal. Thankfully, almost every other area is simple and easy to control, and looks quite nice as well. Game Builder Garage is a frighteningly powerful game creation tool, dragged down by a few limiting factors. The lack of an object creation tool and pyramids means that most games are gonna look like they were made in a game creation suite, but the sheer scope of what's possible helps to take the sting out of the tail. This will actually teach you how to make games. The tutorials that lead you through are by and large excellent, and the inclusion of USB mouse support is a godsend. We're probably unable to even conceive of half of what Switch owners will be able to create using this software, but we're certain that this is going to help propagate the next generation of game developers. You've reached the end of the video, and that means it's, well, I usually say Alex's personal thoughts, but I've been doing more and more reviews recently, so this is just, I suppose, Alex's offhand thoughts. That's better. I've got to say, I really, really like Game Builder Garage. It's really good fun. There are some things that are really confusing and realistically could do with a lot more explanation, as I said, but the nub of the matter, I think, is that, you know, I will try and do something, I can't work it out, and I just sort of go, sort of put it down for a, you know, half an hour or something, and then just all of a sudden it'll just click in my head, it'll just twig, and I'll go, hang on, what about if I do this? And then I do it, and sometimes it works. It can be really daunting to just go in the free programming mode and just sit there and go, what shall I make? And you go, I really have no idea, which is, I suppose, to be expected, but when you actually get an idea in your head, like I thought, hey, I'm going to make a Metroid game, and I thought, hey, I'm going to put some legs on a fish. And I did nothing with that. I had a lot of sort of like part ideas and haven't really like properly followed through with them because I suppose more than anything, in a way, this has really, really helped me appreciate just how bloody difficult games are to make. This does help and does a lot of like the sort of some of the heavy lifting for you. But when you sort of think, okay, well, I'm going to do a thing and have enemies shoot at me and I have to shoot at them, you know, just create very sort of basic shooter type thing. You sort of create the enemy and you go, I have to make this move, follow me, shoot at me, and like take damage when I hit it, but not too much damage, so I can't just use destructible. I have to like give it a health bar, and do I display a health bar? My god, there are so many factors that at least I personally just take for granted whenever it comes to games, and my god, I'm not going to take it for granted ever again. The game swap tool, it may seem like a small thing just from the face of it, but my god, it is so massive. You could create like create a sort of like a baseline game where you've got all the mechanics and everything that you want, and then duplicate that a load of times, and each one can be its own individual level. You get to the end of level 1 that you create, and it immediately takes you to the next game, which is duplicate mechanics and everything, and you go through and you do that. It's wonderful. That is such a sort of a big deal. Much in the same way as Super Mario Maker 2 adding worlds and things like that, it just opens things up and it makes games theoretically actually big and good. I would like a HUD system. If there is a way to do HUD, I haven't worked it out. I'm sure there is a way you can do it, but again, this really is like, I don't want to say low-level programming, maybe it is. Again, I'm not familiar with game development, but it really feels like you have to do a lot from scratch because it is teaching you how to make games. And that alone is extremely laudable. And I don't know about you, but I'm going to try my best to make some really fun games. Or maybe just another Metroid clone.